Dracula from 1931 is the first sound film adaptation of the Bram Stoker novel. Now, it is also mainly based off of the play, but hey, it is the film that is regarded widely as obviously starting the Universal monster movies. Sure, there were some before, but this is the one that really kicked things off. And some would even say that it kicked off horror in American cinema, in the mainstream, that is. We're going to talk about Dracula and a few more Universal monster movies for the rest of this month, as it is the month of October. All this and more on the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Yeah, I cannot function at this hour. I get home from work at like 12:30, and then I'm like, I'm just going to watch a movie. But I didn't last night, obviously. I went to bed early, but...
I didn't go to bed till about 3 because I went over to a friend's house for a game night. We were playing Monopoly though, and it fucking went on for about 6 hours. It was like literally would not finish. And the worst thing was...
we just stopped playing normally. Like my family, I think we played Monopoly like 3 times, and all 3 of them ended in... We just kind of looked at each other and we were like, here, we'll just stop.
Yeah, that's usually how it ends, but I was looking like eventually someone did win, but because I was the designated driver as well, like, I literally couldn't leave even if I wanted to because I was driving. Do you know what I mean? I was fucking
fuck's sake. Do you know what? We'll just say that that's the opening. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Golden Hour Film Podcast. I am Harry Bailey, of course. This is my guest host, not co-host, Shay Mulvaney. And it's Dracula. It's Universal Monster Month. To pull the curtain back a bit, I don't know. I'll probably just leave that conversation in.
Yeah, cool.
This is probably the earliest we've ever recorded the podcast. It's not even that early. I work nights, so the morning is not my friend. Kind of Dracula. And Shane, how are you?
Yeah, pretty tired, like I probably just mentioned there. But no, I'm actually looking forward to the Universal monster movies. I think The Invisible Man is the only one I've seen that I can remember at least. So I'm definitely looking forward to cracking into them this month in our little Halloween mini Universal monster movie series. So it's Dracula, and obviously one of the most important, one of the most famous kind of characters in literature. Certainly one of the most famous Irish exports. I mean, Bram Stoker was from Ireland, in case anyone didn't know, and it's definitely one of the most famous kind of Irish exports that we've given to the world, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that Dracula 1931 is one of, if not the most important of these films that we'll be covering. Is it necessarily the best of the lot? We'll talk about that later, but it's certainly incredibly important. And of course, it introduced me anyway. It introduced most of the world to the man we all love, Bela motherfucking Lugosi. Yeah. I love that guy so much. I've only seen a handful of his roles. He's amazing in The Body Snatcher. I think I mentioned it. I don't know if that was on the podcast or not. Now I've kind of like, now I don't know what we leave in and what we don't. But he basically plays like a lab assistant in a secondary school, but he basically plays it as Dracula. It's great. I've seen him in that other film, The Black Cat, which isn't very good, but the only good parts are when Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff are just hamming it up and going crazy with all the cult stuff. I absolutely love Lugosi. I've seen Invisible Ghost as well. Invisible Ghost has like the most insane opening 15 minutes of a movie ever, and then you see it's only like an hour long, and you're like, oh my god, there's no way they're keeping this up. And they don't, but the first 15 minutes is insane. Dracula is, by all accounts, a mammoth success, both culturally. At the box office it made a success, but it was a pretty doomed filming to begin with anyways. Certainly with the casting, it's pretty fitting that we're doing this the week after The Man Who Laughs, because originally it was meant to be directed by Paul Lenny and starring Conrad Veidt from The Man Who Laughs, but Paul Lenny died of a toothache, as I said last week. Just doesn't happen anymore. And Conrad Veidt was pretty much told by Universal, you don't have good enough English for sound films, go back to Germany. Kind of harsh. So then they went to replace Conrad Veidt with, of course, the man of 1,000 faces, Lon Chaney, who almost got Veidt's role in The Man Who Laughs. And yeah, he then died in pretty much what is basically a freak accident, but like a series of freak accidents all on one film. So I don't know if you know, he was filming a film called Thunder, and it was all shot in the winter. And he caught pneumonia on set, and then he was being treated for the pneumonia, and then a piece of fake snow from the set got lodged in his throat and like scarred his whole insides, and then from that it like developed into an infection, and then he got lung cancer.
That's nasty. That is
But
nasty.
all in the filming of this one film, which came out the year before Dracula. So then Lon Chaney's fucking dead. You don't have Lon Chaney or Conrad Veidt. Who the hell do you get in for this role? They are like the only two people who do this thing.
Yeah.
And you don't have either of them. So who do you get? You get the guy who played Dracula on Broadway, Bela motherfucking Lugosi. Lugosi apparently like campaigned for this role. He took a monster pay cut. He got paid less than 1% of the film's budget, which is insane because he is like one of the most recognizable. He's probably still to this day the most recognizable Dracula ever, and he got paid less than 1% of the film's budget.
Yeah, apparently he got like, I think it was like less than $500 a week, which
Yeah,
or less than, was it? Yeah, which was
and
wasn't
it was
much
it was
back
like
then.
500 quid a week, but it only took him a couple of weeks to film it.
Yeah, exactly. So like when you spread that out over the course of filming, like yeah, it's nothing really. So it's pretty crazy because obviously yeah, we're talking 100 years on, and I would still have been aware of the Bela Lugosi performance without kind of obviously having seen it before. This was my first time seeing the film. But yeah, like pretty crazy that someone as recognizable as that and in a role that's so defined by this performance, yeah, that he wasn't really compensated well enough for it at the time.
Yeah, I mean he had the task of being the first sound vampire in film. No pressure, man. And I think he does it perfectly. He ticks so many boxes, which are now like so many vampire or Dracula tropes have stemmed from his performance.
Yeah,
It was that I I think the only word is iconic. Like it's not like the most incredible piece of acting or anything, but it's like legitimately iconic acting. Like the way he performs in this film is how vampires are now like that's how you be a vampire in a film. You do Bela Lugosi. That's how good a job he did.
apparently as well, Dracula never once blinks his eyes, which I didn't actually cop during the
Yeah.
film, but that's pretty
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
And yeah,
It's
that's
class.
he does a good job of just acting like very slithery and very slimy, and but also obviously trying to keep up this respectable front so that you don't, like, if you were in the film and or if you were, these events were happening to you, you wouldn't necessarily think anything was strange with this dude. But yeah, it's these little small details that just it's very unsettling throughout the whole film, and yeah, also slightly comical in a way as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. No, it's campy as hell, but like
Very
that's
very
part of the
campy.
charm. That's
Yeah.
so part of the charm. Yeah, it's my second time watching it. Uh, I had watched it in parts as well once, but like it's pretty much my second full length time watching it, and I have to say, we'll get to the ratings at the end. My first time watching it, I gave more or less the identical review to you, but on my second time watching it, I've grown to appreciate the film so much more. I really enjoyed it the second time round. I thoroughly enjoyed Dracula. No spoilers or anything, although we kind of all know how it kind of goes. But it's pretty famous, this Dracula dude and what happens in his life. But yeah, it's safe to say that on a rewatch, I thoroughly enjoyed this film. Will you give a spoiler free review?
Yeah, I really love the first kind of act of this film, first 15-ish minutes, 15, 20 minutes. All the stuff with Renfield, how he kind of gets Renfield under his control. At that point, I'm like, oh, this is a banger. And then as they get to London and the stuff with Mina, and it's a good performance by Helen Chandler. It's not on her, but I think it just slows down just a little bit. The stuff with Van Helsing kind of works at times, and then it kind of also doesn't really work at times. So yeah, I'd say I definitely preferred the first half of the film more than the second half. But overall, it was still like it would be a positive review for me. Like, I'm still happy I saw it, and it's still a good introduction to the Universal horror movies, Universal monster movies, I beg your pardon. Although we'll come on to the Invisible Man soon on the podcast, and to be honest, I did enjoy that a lot more than I did this.
No, I'll be honest. I think other than The Mummy and then some of the lower ones, which like are even in contention of being Universal monster movies, I think it's ironic. This one is like on the lower tier, but I still really like it. Like there's some straight bangers in the Universal monster movies, and we'll be covering them this month for sure. And I don't think Dracula, if I'm honest, I don't think Dracula is as good as any of the other 3 films we will cover this month. But I really like Dracula still. I love all 4 films and some of the others as well, of course. But yeah, no, I'm a big fan, and I reckon we get into it.
100%.
So yeah, we open with Tchaikovsky's Swan theme from Swan Lake. It's a bit of a theme song for the Universal monster movies. It's played in, off the top of my head, The Mummy, but I feel like it's used in other ones as well. I've only seen The Mummy that used it, but I know just from reading stuff that other films had it as well. And yeah, basically our boy Renfield, who's played by Dwight Fry, who for me gives maybe the performance of the film. He is so good in this movie, and unfortunately then got typecast as the crazy guy for the rest of his life. Unfortunately, he is on his way to Transylvania. Why is he on his way to Transylvania?
Well, he wants to go to the castle that Count Dracula owns and lives in for some reason. I think he has some sort of deal in place with Count Dracula for a place, a property in London that he's going to lease to him. But as soon as they're on like a horse and carriage, and as soon as someone hears that he wants to go to Count Dracula's place, everyone kind of loses their shit. Basically, everyone they're like, oh, like people say that vampires live there. People say that like it's a spooky place. You're not going to come out there the same. And already the film there is dropping little.
As soon as he mentions the Borgo Pass, they all lose their minds.
Yeah, exactly.
Apparently they filmed a lot of stuff on the Borgo Pass, but it wasn't in film. The film was actually cut a good bit for censorship reasons as well. Towards the end, there's a scene with Dracula. I'll point it out because I don't want to spoil it, that they had to basically cut the audio from. And there was another scene where they had to cut as well at the end, which is the same with Frankenstein at the end. A guy basically comes out and gives like a spooky ending to the ghost story in front of the curtain. That's how this ended as well, but they cut that for some censorship reasons. I don't know, censorship makes no sense. And yeah, basically they say, oh, okay, if you go to Dracula's castle, mate, you're gonna die. There's like wolves and stuff there. And
they actually say outright, yeah, exactly.
Nosferatu's hanging around there. He's a dodgy guy. I hope we cover him on the podcast soon.
Oh, I'm sure we will.
And yeah, apparently the people in the castle shapeshift. And Renfield, he just goes anyway. He just goes anyway. He doesn't listen to them.
Now we see this really sick shot, like establishing shot of the castle in like the kind of the Transylvanian mountains, which obviously aren't real, but yeah, let's go with it. And then we go down to like the catacombs, like underground, underneath the castle, and we see this coffin, and it's just like very eerie. And then we see a hand appear out of the coffin, and it turns out it's a woman's hand. It's not Count Dracula, but then we see Count Dracula. Then we see Count Dracula.
Fuck! What a shot!
It's a stunning shot. It really is. There's a few. There's a few banging.
Bela Lugosi, just his fucking head. It's great.
There's a few absolutely banging shots in this film. That's one of them. And then we see a horse and cart.
Legit, one of the best establishing shots of a character in a horror movie, maybe ever. Like, it's still like to this day.
10 seconds.
It's so iconic.
Absolute brilliance. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we see a horse and cart pull up, which Renfield is in. He gets watched with suspicion by Dracula, who's kind of lurking outside, looking a bit shifty. And then Renfield gets in Dracula's horse and cart. I don't think he knows this is Dracula's, and he doesn't know that it's...
Yeah, no, Dracula's got like a face covering and stuff. We see Dracula go down to the car, and then he has the face covering on. But
so he doesn't realise that it's Count Dracula. Yeah. Doesn't realise that it's Count Dracula's horse and cart that he's in, so then they travel anyway. And then he goes a bit too quickly for Renfield's liking, so Renfield's kind of protesting, saying, slow down, this kind of thing.
Oh, so good.
So then when he gets out to question the driver, he obviously he doesn't realize it's Dracula, but then Dracula is just vanished into thin air. He's not there. It's like no one knows. Renfield doesn't know where he's gone, and yeah, it's just so spooky.
It's a glorious bat on a string instead.
Yeah,
It's a bat on a string driving the cart. It is a glory in all its glory. You can still see the string. It's so perfect. I love it so much. I even watched like a 4K like remastering of it, and they tried so hard to cover up the string, but you can still just about see it. It's great. It's so good.
so yeah, the next morning then Dracula slowly approaches Renfield. Renfield's kind of waiting in the office part of the building with the paperwork and stuff to get this deal done. Dracula
Yeah,
says,
like
"Oh,
the
like
hallway, pretty much.
the hallway." Sorry, yeah. So
Yeah,
then
yeah,
Dracula
yeah.
says, "Oh, like welcome to Transylvania," and
Yeah.
then Dracula's just moving very slowly and deliberately, and he's speaking very cryptically. So like Renfield seems like a bit of an idiot for not copying that something is up with this dude.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, no, like Bela Lugosi hams it up so
Yeah,
much. It's
it's a
great.
very
Like
hammy, but
apparently
very
he,
entertaining.
I hope this is true, but apparently like before every scene in his trailer, he just like stare into a mirror and go, "I am Dracula," over and over and over again, and then he'd go out kind of
That was
like the
brilliant.
fucking purple cobras from Dodgeball.
Apparently, the only other
Um,
time he played Dracula, which I haven't seen, is in an Abbott and Costello film, and like you can
yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah.
you can see that like because it doesn't take much. You probably wouldn't even have to change anything about his performance. It would still work in that kind of a setting.
Yeah. No, he did so many. He did a lot of horror films,
Yeah.
especially back then. He did some of the Frankenstein sequels as well. I'm fairly sure. I haven't seen. There's one of his films I still want. Well, there's two of his films I really want to see. Obviously, Plan 9 from Outer Space, Ed Wood Jr.'s iconic disaster piece, and White Zombie. Just I don't know. That film always just kind of it was like The Body Snatcher, which I've since watched. It's like one of them films where like you see who's in it and you see the poster over and over again, and you're like, oh, I need to get around to that. But yeah, I have to say, the Dracula's castle looks better than most sets
It
in
does. Yeah.
films today. It looks so great. It's huge. The cobweb budget on this film was probably bigger than what they paid Bela Lugosi. There is so many cobwebs, and they're huge. The rubble is everywhere. The lighting is perfect, especially because they use these two little pencil lights that they just kept shining in Bela Lugosi's face, especially in close-ups, but just to give like the aesthetic of like his eyes are
Yeah.
like the center of
Wide.
attention, and then obviously he's not blinking as well, so it makes it even harder to look away from his eyes, which kind of leads into the whole like hypnosis thing he does sometimes, his Jedi mind trick he has. But yeah, no, I think it looks amazing, and yeah, of course, just iconic as hell. I am Dracula, like. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you fucking are, Bella.
Yeah,
And
motherfucker.
he brings Renfield up to his I don't know what these rooms are even called in a house this big. It's not his chamber because that's his bedroom. He brings him into the study, we'll call it. There's like a fire lit for him, and they discuss paperwork, and basically, yeah, Dracula wants to get a boat to London to get this new property, and Renfield is organizing it. He works in I was gonna say retail. What's it called?
It's like property development or property
Yes,
management
that's
or
it.
that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah. He
Yeah.
works. He's a property manager. He does leasing and stuff. So he's organized this whole trip for Dracula, and Dracula's like, oh, perfect. And then Renfield accidentally gives himself a paper cut on the form, and Dracula
That's so good.
lunges at him. But then when he was in the taxi, when he finally decided he was going to go up, an old lady gave him a crucifix, and the crucifix, as he's like bent over to grab his finger, it falls out of his pocket and scares Dracula off. It's great. It's subtle. It's great. And when I say it's subtle, I mean it's not subtle
It's
at
not
all,
subtle, yeah.
because it's literally like taking up the entire screen when that crucifix falls down. It's perfect. And yeah, no, Bela Lugosi just kind of like shies away, and he's like, "All right, perfect. Well, I'm off to bed, lad." And
They
he
actually,
bids
as
him adieu.
well, Dracula actually pours a bit of wine for Renfield after he sees the
Oh
blood. So
yeah,
again,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
again not subtle at all, but it's again
yeah, yeah,
making
yeah.
the kind of parallel between obviously wood and blind, or Jesus, wood and blind, bloody hell, wine and blood. For fuck's sake, blood and wine. Yeah. So not
Yeah.
subtle in the least though.
And so Dracula heads to his room, and then Renfield goes over to the window, and another bat on a string shows up, and behind him is the three women in white. That's the only time we see these ones in particular, but they're just kind of referred. The Dracula's followers are the women in white, and these three kind of gang up behind Renfield as this bat, I don't know, causes him to faint. It's a real 30s thing. Happened in the cinema, in
Yeah,
films back then all the time. People just used to faint whenever they were scared. It was a thing apparently, and probably low iron.
It's
Probably just all dope.
and it's very comical.
Taking their vitamins in the morning, so they were all just prone to faint.
It's very comical as well the way Renfield kind of falls down. Like it's not natural looking at all, really. But yeah, then they start to approach his body with Dracula. No music at all, but in this film at all. I was actually happy with that. There's only one scene I could probably point to where I think a little bit of spooky music would have done the trick. But like it does give this eerie kind of sense when there's just nothing to accompany what you're seeing on screen. So it's all your attention is. It just makes it actually a little bit more unsettling, really. But they approach his body, and then we're left kind of wondering what's going to become of Renfield. And then we cut to the Vesta ship for England. And then Renfield seems to have had a bit of a personality transplant because he's just acting like a crazed maniac, like a crazed lunatic at this point. And he opens the coffin and he tells Dracula, "I'm going to be loyal to you, and will you keep your promise to me in return?" But then outside we can see that the ship is like basically nearly cratering. It's the sea is wild. And
the shots
massive
are
storm.
so good. And the first time I watched this film, I was like, whoa, these shots are amazing. But then I found out that they're actually taken from a short film, a silent film from years before called The Stormbreaker that Universal released, and I don't think it was a particularly big success or anything. So they reused 2 shots from it, and I'll be honest, works better in Dracula because it really makes the film feel huge at this. Now, the on-ship shots are great where like they're fighting the waves and stuff, but you can tell so obviously it's like a miniature in a bathtub whenever you actually see the full boat. That's pretty funny. But it looks epic, as it looks huge. And as you said, he's pretty crazy, and the sun goes down and he wakes Dracula up. And then the next morning on the ship we find out that everybody's dead. They are all dead aboard the Vesta, and it's just Renfield on board. We don't see Dracula anymore, so I think it's safe to assume Dracula went back to bed. He's a man who, is pretty regimented, and I like that about this film. It's pretty set in stone. Dracula's only out at night. There's no ifs, buts, or maybes. He's out at night, and as soon as the sun starts coming out, he has to get back into bed. Otherwise, he's dead. It's a pretty hard and fast rule, which, the ending, bit of a letdown, but if you just keep that in mind as to how regimented they are and that, it kind of makes a bit more sense. I'm just trying to justify the ending. It's the weakest part of the film. But,
we see newspaper article as well, speaking about basically what happened on the ship, and it says, The sole survivor is a raving maniac, it says, under Dr. Seward's watch. So kind of introducing the fact that this Dr. Seward guy is going to be a person of interest to Dracula. And then
it's worth noting as well, when I find Renfield on the ship, that shot of him
looking down on him.
When you can hear him laugh, and Dwight Frye does this laugh a few times in the film, this like proper crazy laugh. And they find him, and they like open the door, and you can see he's down at the bottom of the staircase, and the way the light is shining in his face and his eyes,
they look absolutely
like legit. I said it in my Letterboxd review, but like it's some of the best face acting I've probably ever seen. He plays crazy in one facial expression so well, with like the accompanied by his laugh as well. But it's so good. It's so great.
It's brilliant. Like, it's, again, not the most subtle, but like it really, really is effective. Really is effective.
Yeah.
So we cut to the streets of London, and Dracula attacks a young girl who was selling flowers in the streets of London, and then obviously there's this whole commotion then. So turns out that there's this has been going on for a while. Obviously people are unsure as to what's going on, but obviously it's creating a bit of a panic. And then he visits the opera and he hypnotizes one of the women who works there into delivering a message to Dr. Seward. He's found out that Dr. Seward is going to be at this opera. And then she says, "Oh, there's a message for you downstairs, sir." So as he's getting up to leave, Dracula intercepts him and he kind of introduces himself, says, "I'm going to be your neighbour next door. I've just moved into Carfax Abbey." So he kind of just introduces himself to make noise. And yeah, he's trying to just ingratiate himself into Seward's life and the Seward's acquaintance's life.
Yeah, and Seward is there with John, his... are they married yet?
No, soon to be son-in-law. Well,
yeah, soon to be son-in-law,
yeah.
his daughter Mina, and his daughter's friend Lucy. And they kind of fill Dracula in then on what happened on the ship, and Dracula's like, "Oh, well, there's worse things than death, I guess, you know?" And they're kind of like, what? And he's like, there's worse things to be than dead. And I was like, that's kind of suspicious.
It's a weirdo.
Yeah. They're like, who is this freak and why is my dad friends with him? Yeah, that night, Lucy, the friend of Mina and John, we see her in her bed and she doesn't see Dracula. He's become a bat outside her window and he just kind of hovers around outside her window until she falls asleep. And then as soon as she falls asleep, transforms into Dracula, comes into her room. And very slowly, but very surely, Dracula's her. Yeah, he sucks the blood out of her neck because the next time we see her is basically on an observatory operating table. And the doctor basically says it's the same as a few victims he's found now. It has these 2 little holes on their neck. There's a serious loss of blood, and she's dead. Is Lucy? Dracula he's becoming a bit of a serial killer.
Becoming, yeah, I think it's You could say that to say the least.
Becoming, yeah. I've just big leagued Dracula.
This has been going on.
Like, now you're a serial killer. You're doing it in London. It is fucking big league Dracula.
He can finally do it on a wet Tuesday night in Stoke.
Yeah.
Renfield is then we cut to Renfield, who's in a mental hospital. That's not my terminology, by the way. It's kind of just what people
they call it
at the time.
Is it sanitarium or sanatorium?
Sanatorium, I think. But
yeah, sanitarium
kind of
sounds like a very clean place.
Yeah. That's kind of the verbiage they would have used at the time, so apologies for the crude reference. But anyway, he's trying to eat spoilers and flies, so he's clearly dual-alley, this dude. And Van Helsing, who works there, he believes that they're dealing with Nosferatu, the vampire. And then he starts to get checked out by Van Helsing, who's trying to convince Dr. Seward of his theory that vampires now live among us, and this guy is clearly being influenced and controlled by a vampire. And then they hear wolves howling outside. And Renfield apparently believes they're talking to him because he starts to answer back and he's starting to almost converse with these wolves outside, even though obviously they can't speak English. And then Van Helsing then produces wolfsbane out of his jacket pocket, which is a herb, he says, is used in Central Europe to protect against vampires. And then Renfield just kind of flips and he's clearly spooked and he's freaked about this wolfsbane. He's not happy at all to see this wolfsbane that Van Helsing has produced. So then we hear the wolf howl again, and Renfield then talks to Dracula, who says nothing. He's not even talking back. He's literally just kind of staring into space.
Yeah, he communicates. Dracula has gotten to a point now. He's that powerful where he can he can communicate telepathically with his subjects. Yeah.
So then he seems to be telling Renfield he wants him to do something. It's hinted that he wants him to kill Mina or attack Mina in some way, and Renfield's distraught by this because for whatever reason he still seems to have a tiny little bit in this scene of kind of humanity in him, and he's very disturbed by the idea that he wants Renfield to do this thing for him. So then
it's
Dracula
really interesting. I think he plays the conflicted character, especially towards the end of the film. But I think he plays the conflicted character quite well. He sometimes leans into the crazy side a lot, which he also does very well. When you're going from the silent era to the sound era, everything's kind of exaggerated, I feel. Because if it's not exaggerated, definitely. It's boring. At the end of the day, say you never watch this film for another 5 years, you'll remember Bela Lugosi as Dracula. You'll remember Dwight Fry as Renfield, and you'll maybe remember Edward Van Sloan as Van Helsing. Who played John?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Exactly. Yeah. So when you're going from the silent era to the sound era, basically, in order to be a memorable character, you kind of had to ham it up at the time because like
Yeah, well,
the writing probably wasn't there just yet, and like the
yeah.
pacing of the films wasn't quite there just yet. That it was basically, if your film was good, I feel like a lot of it was down to the performances.
But in the silent era as well, like it was just the done thing to kind of ham up your performances and exaggerate
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you didn't have dialogue, you didn't have like audio, you didn't have lines to say to kind of supplement your performances. So then when the transition happened for a few years, there are people who were just obviously still in the habit of acting the way they would have acted on in film. And then it's only probably about maybe 10 years later, once you get towards the 40s, where, like, even Gone with the Wind, some of the Gone with the Wind acting, which is from 1939, even then, some of that's a little bit exaggerated. But it's only when once you get into the
Have you
40s.
seen Mr. Smith Goes to Washington?
No, I do want to see
Oh,
it,
it's
though.
so good. That came out before Gone with the Wind. That's Jimmy Stewart and Claude Rains.
Oh, man,
Banger. The acting in that is perfect.
incredible
Yeah.
actors. But yeah,
Yeah,
once
no,
you get
that's
towards the
yeah,
40s, then that's when you start to see the more naturalistic acting
yeah,
kind of approaches that we now see today, even still. And even then, like acting now as opposed to obviously the 40s or even the 50s or 60s is obviously even different. But yeah, that's obviously, this is very, very shortly after the sound has taken over and the silent film kind of has more or less created. So people are still approaching acting in the same way that they would have in the silent era. So yeah,
yeah,
we're considering. But yeah, then Dracula, we see, coming back to Dracula, he kind of enters a room then. We don't really see who's in the room. But he enters a room and he just bares his teeth. So clearly he's up to no good.
yeah. He we see then Mina. It's been a few days now, and Mina's describing this really bad. She doesn't call it a dream. John, her husband, keeps telling her. Sorry, her soon-to-be husband keeps calling it a dream. That basically she was trying to fall asleep, but she couldn't because she heard a wolf howl, and then she saw these two big red eyes, and all of a sudden she just felt very cold, and John, and particularly Van Helsing, who is probably worth noting, actually played Van Helsing on Broadway opposite Lugosi before the film Edward Van Sloan.
Nice.
He kind of takes an interest in this actually because he's kind of like, well, is there any reason why you would have this dream? Because like in his head, he's like, well, like at this point, vampires aren't like common knowledge or anything. So,
Yeah.
like if she's describing a vampire experience without having any knowledge as to what a vampire is, that's a bit of a red flag. So then he asks if he can see her neck, and she shows him, and yeah, she has the two marks there. And John's like, oh my god, when did this happen? Why didn't you tell me? Or John.
And then just
And
at that moment, Dracula arrives. So he just arrives
yes, he does.
in the nick of time, yeah. But then as this conversation is going on and Dracula's kind of making noise with everyone and he's talking, he's actually standing right beside Mina. And one of the best, might be actually, in a way, like I did say, I love the first kind of 20 minutes more than anything in the film, but this might be the best scene in the film, or this certainly the best little moment in the film where Van Helsing is looking at this and he's just over the corner of his eye, he kind of spots in the mirror that even though he can see Mina in the mirror, he can't see Dracula. So he does a double taking and he's looking back. He just keeps looking back and forth, and like his eyes aren't deceiving him. He really can't see Dracula. So this is just obviously so freaky. He's invisible. The mirror can't detect Dracula. So they say to Mina, look, go to bed and get a bit of rest and you'll feel better in the morning, kind of thing. So Dracula obviously is telling Mina, look, I'm going to kind of look and see how you are a little bit later, so I'll make sure you're doing okay. But obviously then Van Helsing's suspicions are very much aroused at this point because his working theory is starting to definitely gain more and more credence.
Yeah, and he's got this box with a mirror in it, which apparently, so for those who don't know, they filmed this in the mornings, and then they filmed a Spanish language version on the same sets at nighttime, basically to do two films in one, because Universal they were kind of just getting into the whole monster movie thing, literally. So they thought they'd be experimental and they'd do a Spanish language version as well. And apparently this is like one of the scenes where, because the Spanish were filming at night afterwards, they had it in their heads, so like, we have to do better than what they did in the morning. So like, in this scene, when Van Helsing like shows in the mirror and Dracula kind of spots it away, it's like, no, in the Spanish one, he like KOs that mirror. He like smashes it into the ground with his fist, and he like hams it up massively. It's great, but yeah, he tries to put the mirror in Dracula's face to see what would it do, and Dracula hates it, and he smashes it away, and yeah, Dracula doesn't really make any effort to kind of hide what he just did, because it was pretty over the top. In fairness, he's just kind of, well, he says a really good line. He says, "For one who has lived one lifetime, Van Helsing, you're a very clever man."
Yeah.
And he says to the rest of the lads in the room, John and Dr. Seward, he's just like, I'm sure Van Helsing will probably explain to you what just happened there. he just like leaves. He like Homer Simpson back into the hedge.
Yeah, Dracula.
Like his work here's done.
He kind of just, the only thing he says to mitigate it is he just says he doesn't like mirrors, which obviously like is a bit weird. It's not it's not any sort of explanation. So yeah, once he makes his leave, then Harker spots a wild dog outside, and then Van Helsing says, no, it's actually a wolf. Again, coming back to the whole he can turn into a wolf kind of thing. And then he realizes that Dracula is the vampire he's that they've been kind of looking for, and he's the one who's been causing all this carnage and attacking young girls and stuff like this. So yeah, at this point the evidence is pretty much insurmountable, and Van Helsing's theory has been proven correct. So then Mina meets Dracula outside for some reason. She has decided to meet him outside, and then Van Helsing realizes Dracula must have bought boxes of Transylvanian soil with him, because obviously he needed to kind of be protected from the new climate, the new whatever. So that's how he obviously stays protected, and that's how he obviously manages to stay kind of alive. And then Renfield is eavesdropping outside, and he orders them to, quote, take her away from him. But then he hears Dracula outside, so he starts to get kind of freaky. So again, another little sign of Renfield. A little bit of his flicker of humanity seeping through, where he's trying to help Mina, and he's trying to like nudge them in the right direction, but then he's just so petrified of Dracula that he
keeps saying, if you don't send me somewhere else, it's on your hands what happens to Mina. He's like, I don't want to do this. Like, if anything happens to Mina and I'm here, it's your own fault. You need to send me somewhere else. But then Dracula overhears this, and he's like, I'm sorry, master, I didn't say anything. I swear to God, I didn't say anything. And they're like, master? And then he's like, you Dracula's servant? And he's like, Dracula? I've never even heard of that name.
Yeah. So yeah, Renfield then starts to make like really weird noises, and then a maid shrieks, and she discovers Mina's body outside, and obviously Dracula's left her in a bit of a state. They think she's dead, and then Renfield starts making weird noises. I repeat myself. But then they manage to just run outside and kind of get Mina's body, and they manage to realise she's not actually dead, but they bring her in, and Dracula just kind of then watches on really spookily from the distance, because obviously he wasn't trying to actually kill her. He wanted them to think she's still alive, and actually she spoiler alert, she's now under his control.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well that it's just a bit of a cliffhanger in the middle of the movie, but the maid who screamed out when she saw what happened to Mina faints, and when all the guys run out, Renfield doesn't, and then he kind of gets on all fours and starts like crawling towards her, because there's a bit of a subplot. It's clearly just to kind of explain like vampire lore, where they keep addressing that Renfield, at first he was eating flies, and then he's eating spiders, and then he's eating rats, and like he's just eating things that are getting progressively bigger, basically. And he says that's how Dracula like gets you as well. He like puts this vision in your head of like 1,000 rats, and he's like, I can make these real, and they'll be all yours if you just do what I tell you. Because they've got such a bloodlust now. So he gets on all fours and he just kind of crawls towards the maid, and we never find out what happens to that maid.
No,
I don't think, unless she's the maid who is like with Martin at the end when he like pulls the shotgun. I don't know if they're the same maid or not. Maybe they're the same maid. Maybe Renfield let her live. Hopefully. Here's hoping. I'd say he did. I'd say he left her
He
alone.
has a bit of a flicker of humanity, so maybe, but yeah. Then Van Helsing then starts to ask Mina about Lucy. Couldn't actually seen beforehand. Another small child is crying outside, and then we learn that a woman in white is going around basically biting women in the throat. So it's not just Dracula, and it's not just it's not just Dracula anymore. He now is getting these women under his control now to go around doing the same thing. So we don't know who this
Yeah,
woman is
and
at the moment.
and then so they ask Mina, who the woman in white. Sorry, they asked Mina what happened basically, and she said she saw Lucy out the night before, and she was dressed in all white, and she just basically she described the feeling, the sensation she had when she had the dream of Dracula. So yeah, Lucy is one of Dracula's women in white now, the girl from earlier, and she tells John that they can't be in love anymore because she doesn't know enough about this whole Dracula thing to be able to trust herself that she's not going to do anything. I'll be honest, on a first watch, I had no interest in the subplot. But I'll be honest, on a second watch, I was kind of into it. I thought Mina was pretty cool. I thought she was an interesting character. Still haven't quite found anything interesting about John. He's just John.
He's just
But
boring.
yeah, he's just there. But no, I thought Mina was an interesting character, and her like what she has going on in her life, where now she has to basically juggle. I'm becoming a vampire, but I'm also engaged.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I
like,
mean, it's a pretty interesting dynamic for a character to go through.
because you've just mentioned there that you're more on the fence of she knows what she's doing, like she's more in control of her own faculties at this point. Because the
At
way I
this
read
point,
that
yeah.
film, yeah, at this point, because the way I read the film is that basically, and again, I'm probably wrong because you've seen it more times than I have, and yes, but I had read it that she's already basically fully under Dracula's control, and she's almost doing what he wants her to do at this point. Where when she answers to John that like I can't be with you anymore, that's what Dracula wants her to do. So that's why she's doing that. I might be wrong.
Right.
I probably wrong.
I'd be interested because see, I read it as because then later on, she all of a sudden she's really interested in John again because she's trying to get him to get the crucifix away. So I read it as like she's trying her best to push him away from her to keep him safe. But then later on in the film, when she is fully under Dracula's spell, she's all of a sudden like, "Oh, John, I love you."
That's
Come
a more
here," so that
interesting.
she can get him to do.
I like the idea
Yeah,
that she has a bit more kind of resistance than maybe our average person, certainly than Renfield did.
yeah.
And that she's kind of resisting and resisting and resisting. That's probably a more interesting viewing of it than my own.
Yeah, that's how I read it anyway on my second viewing. I probably read it the same as you the first time, that it was just like a generic love story that was just kind of thrown in there just to make it like part of the film and kind of pad it out a bit. But no, I actually found Mina much more interesting on my second viewing. And yeah, because as well it kind of mirrors Renfield's character, who is also like still somewhat in control, but like he's far less in control now because he's a little bit further down the line in the transformation than Mina. So, and as well, it's alluded to later as well with Van Helsing that like a lot of it's down to just like the person's raw willpower as to how much control Dracula has over them. So for someone like Mina, who is like a central character in the film, so it's kind of alluded to that she would have a lot of raw willpower. It takes longer for her to become a vampire than say Lucy, the side character.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So then, Dracula tells Van Helsing to return to his own country, and he says, "quote My blood now flows through her veins." So he's not even hiding the fact at this point that
It's a baller line, by the way. That's a great way of saying I stole your girl.
Because actually, did we mention the fact that basically Renfield now is fully batshit? He's ranting about rats and blood and how Dracula got into serum. You mentioned that. So now Van Helsing says, "Look, I know how to save Mina. She's obviously under Dracula's spell at this point." So he says, "I'm going to find his earth box and I'm going to drive a stake through his heart." Again, probably now what we would know as being in vampire lore, that the way to kill a vampire is either to expose them to sunlight or else to drive a stake through their heart. Those are probably the main two things, and Van Helsing is opting for the latter tactic in this case. And then Dracula
it's interesting as well, obviously, because Dracula is an interpretation of Vlad the Impaler, the serial killer from way back when, and he used to impale people with stakes. So
cool, yeah.
Bram Stoker just flipped that on its head.
And then Dracula then seems to be trying to almost use then at this point like a spell to summon Van Helsing towards him. And Van Helsing, he's actually kind of like Mina, maybe. He's resisting and he's resisting, but you can see it's really difficult for him. And then just as it looks like he might break, he pulls out the crucifix, which obviously repels Dracula again because, we've seen throughout the film a few times now that a crucifix, for some reason, where maybe it's religious imagery, is the thing that can kind of repel Dracula from being able to have his way with you, basically.
And yeah, in the meantime, John has been trying to persuade Mina to just come with him to London, to go to the police, because he's still not buying into this whole vampire thing. He's a skeptic, is our good old boring John. And initially she just kind of goes along with it, but Van Helsing and Dr. Stewart are like, I think you should just maybe be a bit more patient, John. Maybe let's not rush into this. And this comes to bite John, because then he's outside on the bench with Mina, and Mina sees a bat flying overhead. Dracula's obviously turned into a bat and is telepathically communicating with her, and she's talking back to the bat out loud, which freaks John out a bit, but then he kind of ignores it.
He's a moron in this scene.
Yeah, she downplays it, and then he just like accepts it, and she then more or less convinces John to go and take the crucifix from Van Helsing. So Van Helsing then comes out, and you can actually see that while she's trying to convince him, and he's like, okay, maybe not. Maybe that's not a good idea, but I'm not sure. She's like, all right, well then fuck it. And she kind of like slowly then goes for his neck the way Dracula does. And Van Helsing, as I said, just comes out in the nick of time, crucifix, and she jumps away. And John's like, hey, what the hell? And then he snatches it from Van Helsing, the big idiot. And he's like, I don't remember what it is he says, but he basically shows it to me, and he's like, there, I got it, or something stupid like that. And obviously that frightens her. And then that is finally the light bulb moment for boring John, that, oh, she really is scared of this thing.
Maybe
she's a vampire.
He acts like an idiot throughout this whole scene. Like, fair enough, he's a skeptic and whatever, but I mean, the evidence is right there, bro. She's literally talking to a bat in front of your eyes, like, for fuck's sake. So then Dracula lies in wait for the maid back at the castle, or back at the house, whatever. And then Stewart, then he hears a noise, Dr. Stewart, and then Dracula arrives and he approaches Mina's bed, so he's up to no good again. And then John spots Renfield, who's kind of lurking in outside, as he's done a few times. Dracula and Mina then enter the castle, and Renfield arrives too. And then Van Helsing and John then pursue Renfield, because Renfield's off to find Dracula's lair, because he wants to basically sort something out. So then they call Mina, and Renfield protests that he didn't lead them there, because obviously Dracula has taken Mina down to this lair, so they're in pursuit. And Renfield's like, it wasn't me, master, it wasn't me. So then Dracula attacks Renfield, who's begging for his life, because obviously he doesn't really believe him. He thinks that Renfield has turned on him. And
it's pretty powerful as well, because he's like, please don't kill me.
Yeah.
Please don't kill me with all these bodies and all this bloodshed on my mind.
Yeah.
It's like, oh.
He still has.
He performed it so well.
Yeah, it's a really good performance, and he still has obviously those memories of his unwilling acts on his mind, and he doesn't want to be left with those. So it's not really said whether he does kill Renfield. I don't think, is it?
Oh no, so Dracula kind of, it's this big class looking staircase. It's huge, and Dracula just kind of comes down with his hand, and then the next time we see Renfield, he's literally just like backwardsly rolling down the stairs, so it's safe to assume. Yeah. And we don't see Renfield for the rest of the film, so I think it's safe to assume Renfield's dead.
Yeah, fair enough. So then Dracula then is leaving with Mina, now is unconscious, by the way, and Dracula then leaves with Mina's body, just evading John. John almost catches him, but then he doesn't quite. So then Van Helsing then is searching around the catacombs. That's what I'm going to call it. I'm not 100% sure of the catacombs, but that's what I'm going with. And then it's kind of his lair. Dracula's lair, basically.
Yeah,
so then
his basement.
Yeah. So Van Helsing is kind of searching around the coffins, and he opens the coffin and he realises Mina's not in the coffin. So, that's his theory out the window. And then John retrieves it back. So then Van Helsing then, he manages to see Dracula, and he stabs him through the heart then, because he is in the other coffin. So he's obviously hibernating. And they don't really know where Mina is at this point, but Van Helsing stabs Dracula through the heart, and then Mina feels it. So wherever Mina is, she can kind of feel Dracula's wound in her own body. And then she screams and wails, which obviously then alerts John as to where she is. And she wakes up from the trance, the hypnosis that she was under. And then John saves her. And Van Helsing tells her Dracula is dead forever. So they leave the castle, and that's Dracula dead, basically. He did.
Yeah, and that's the end. Yeah, I think it's a common consensus that the ending is rushed.
Yeah, it's too
Uh,
rushed.
but yeah, it's probably just lacking a killer final act, and it would probably be much higher in people's rankings. But yeah, I have to say, just to get into my review, I really did enjoy it on a second time around. The first time I watched it, I gave it 3 stars. I was like, yeah, no, I can see why people like it, but like the love affair is pointless, and the second act just doesn't do it for me. The second half, should I say? Because yeah, I have to say, on this second viewing for me, the first half, like I'm not even going by acts. The first half is amazing. It's so great, and I'm taking that from like obviously the beginning to right up until I don't know, Renfield still being a kooky motherfucker, and he's just doing it great. I just think Dwight Fry is so good in this film. He performs the role so great. Yeah, as a matter of fact, he basically does the freaky servant role, how most people do the freaky servant role ever since as well. It's safe to say that like Dwight Fry kind of did that role because obviously we've Frankenstein later that year, and yeah. Wait, Dwight Fry is it? Am I right in saying Dwight Fry plays that role?
I haven't seen Frankenstein, believe it or not.
Yeah, what am I saying? Yeah, Dwight Fry literally plays Dr. Frankenstein's assistant in that film then as well. He plays Fritz. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, anyway. No wonder he coined the kooky sidekick thing. He did it in Dracula and Frankenstein. And he was also in Invisible Man as well. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed this. As I said, 3.5 stars. Really, really great. Loved how campy it was. Bela Lugosi, you are my hero. For my spooky season thing on Letterboxd, I am gonna lean into a bit more Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff stuff because they're like an hour long and they're great crack. And yeah, Tod Browning, the director. His only other kind of really big hit film that's kind of still relevant. I don't even think it was a big hit at the time, but his only other film that is quite relevant still is a film called Freaks, which I really want to watch, and that actually came after this, which is ironic because people say that Tod Browning failed to go from the silent era to the sound era, but you could argue his two biggest films were from the sound era, in Dracula and Freaks. And yeah, I also want to cover, who knows, maybe I've already posted the video, but I want to cover the Spanish language one as well in a Who Done It Better. So I'll probably watch Freaks before then as well, and I might even talk about all three in the one video. Who knows? But yeah, overall, Bela Lugosi is the GOAT. Dwight Fry does really great. Really, really enjoyed it. On a rewatch, I much preferred it. I thought Mina's character was far more interesting on a second watch. And yeah, I'd be interested to know what you guys all think in the comments. What's your interpretation of Mina's arc? Because the first time I watched it, I did just think, oh yeah, it's a generic love story that's just kind of thrown in there so that there's some sort of stakes involved, pun intended. Yeah, no, second time around, I thought she was a genuinely interesting character, and Boring John is there too. What did you think?
Yeah, like overall, I did enjoy the film. Like I think me and you have kind of had disagreements in the past because when I give a film 3 stars, that's almost like a little bit disappointing to you. But for me, 3 stars is a recommendation. Like it's not say I obviously have things that I can.
I can't wait to cover It's a Wonderful Life.
Well, look, I'm sure we'll come to it. I'm sure I'll probably like It's a Wonderful Life. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll dislike it more. But anyway, it is to me a recommendation. I gave it 3 stars. And like overall, I did enjoy the film, and I could recommend it to people. Bela Lugosi is very, very camp and very, very fun in the role. Dwight Fry is great as Renfield. A lot better than Nicholas Hoult, who's an actor I usually like, but yeah, that Renfield film from a couple of years ago.
Oh, actually, I didn't even see that. Yeah,
it's not up to much, to be honest with you. It's fine, like fine but forgettable. But obviously, it's coming out. It's tonally way different than Dracula. Like it's more of a comedy for sure. But anyway. Overall, I did enjoy the film. Some of the set directions, or the set designs, I should say, is absolutely stunning, as we said. Yeah, so that there are some stuff to like, even though, yeah, as the film kind of got on more and more, as it progressed more and more, I think it was slightly less interesting and less interesting as it went on. But overall, I do think it's worth a watch.
And yeah, that's Dracula. Before we go, have you watched anything? I feel like we're recording this not that long after we recorded our last episode. So have you watched anything in between episodes?
Very little. Like, don't have much time at the moment to even be kind of doing stuff like that. So I can't even remember, to be honest. I think yeah, very, very little since the last time I updated everyone. It's on my letterboxd anyway.
Yeah, no, I've watched like literally, I watched two films. I watched Slumber Party Massacre, which is like a seminal '80s slasher, but it's fine. I see why people love it because it's such a slasher, but like I'm kind of take it or leave it, and I'm more leave it, to be honest. Like it does a lot of things well, and the last act is good, but yeah, it's just kind of there. And then I also watched Funny Games, which is like legitimately one of the most fucked up movies I've ever seen. Have you? Yeah, no. Ooh. I was talking to a woman in work who is Eastern European, and she's very good for recommending European films to me. So I said to her, "Oh, have you seen Funny Games? It's this Austrian film from the '90s. It's really, really, really dark." And she was like, "Oh no, I'll watch it." And I was like, "No, no, 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 that's not what I was saying." Now that being said, I gave it 4.5 stars. Like it's like similar to like Cure or like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's like what you're watching is incredible, but you just feel
So creeped out by it.
you just feel
Horror films in
afterwards.
general aren't really, I've said it before, I think, on the podcast, probably not great because we're in October and obviously it's spooky season and stuff like that, but it's not like my favourite genre. It's not the genre I kind of seek out. I know it's obviously people love it, but I do think this Universal Monster little run that we're doing is probably more my bag because yeah, it's more like outlandish characters like Dracula, like the Invisible Man. Those things I can get on board with more than kind of your slashers or your gore, this kind of thing. Like lots and lots of blood. I do prefer the stuff like Dracula and the Invisible Man, etc., more than that kind of stuff when it comes to horror.
Yeah, that's the thing with Funny Games. Is Funny Games. Someone described it perfectly. They just said it's like the biggest fuck you to the audience I've ever seen, because all the violence that's alluded to is all off screen. And then, not to get into spoilers, but the first time that we get a bit of gore, it's on the good side, and then the director does something absolutely insane, which makes total sense within the context of the film. But it's soul destroying. Like it's like you don't want to see it. You don't want to see any of the violence in the film. Like you're trying to look away, but like the camera's doing that for you. And then the first time that you think, oh my god, and you actually get gore, but like you're wanting it to happen because it's like, oh, thank God. And what the director then does is absolute. It's so cruel. It's one of the most memorable twists in thriller / horror I've probably ever seen. And yeah, that's Funny Games. You can't like recommend Funny Games because of how dark and twisted it is, but like it is, like it's an amazing movie. But yeah, it's certainly not for everyone. Like yeah, although it's got a very positive graph on Letterboxd, which is strange to me because like I thought I'd be in the minority for thinking it was really, really good, despite how dark it is. Anyway, next week, Frankenstein. I'm buzzing. Haven't seen Frankenstein in a while. You've not seen it. It's James Whale.
Not that I can remember, at least. Maybe as a kid,
Yeah,
but I doubt it.
James Whale, who also did Bride of Frankenstein and Invisible Man. James Whale's a bit of a legend. He also did The Old Dark House, which I haven't seen. It's like one of the classic haunted house movies. I'll probably watch that in the next month as well. And yeah, Frankenstein. Can't wait. I love Frankenstein. Great film. Boris Karloff. We've got Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff simultaneously on the podcast. Great success. Great success.
Yeah, I'm expecting to like Frankenstein because, again, as I said, outlandish character, obviously based on existing literature as well, and it's a story I do know, even though I haven't seen this interpretation of it. Before we go, I'll just quickly plug the 12 Angry Men, who did it better comparison video that probably went up probably about a week or two ago. If you're watching this, also plug the Psycho one that Harry did from the 1960 version versus the 1998 version if you haven't seen it. So a couple of little shorter videos, non-podcast videos, just a little thing that we're kind of trying out here on the channel. And yeah, if you haven't seen those, check them out.
Yeah, by then hopefully I'll have also got 2 others done, but yeah, it's kind of hard to know. We're as far as filming goes, the podcast, we're very ahead of schedule, but like with other stuff, it's pretty hard to schedule in the shorter videos. But like I really want to make them, don't get me wrong. Like I really enjoy making the shorter videos as well. But yeah, that's been Dracula. Thank you very much, guys, and we'll see you all next week for Frankenstein. What a fun little. This is gonna be a fun little month. I love the Universal monster movies. They're pretty feel. Actually, Dracula goes pretty. Not Dracula. Frankenstein goes pretty dark. It goes darker than you think it will. But yeah, the Universal monster movies. There's something like cozy about them in October.
Yeah, looking forward to it, for sure.
And yeah, see you next week. I've been Harry Bailey.
I've been Shane Vanny.
And that's been the Golden Hour Film Podcast.